Our sponsor this month is Published, an affiliate of Village Voices. Published offers all author services from writing tips, critiques, manuscript evaluations, and editing, as well as tips to help you become published. If you prefer to self-publish, purchase the step-by-step book on publishing through Amazon, or purchase services a la carte, from formatting to creating custom covers, or even tips to gather endorsements. The staff is headed by 2 professional writers. After your books are published, either trade paper, electronically, or both, purchase marketing tips, web services, book trailers, or turn your book into an audiobook. Publish provides all your writing, publishing, and marketing needs. So give them a call at 941-748-6865. Contact them online at dgould497@aol.com, or go to the website at www.publishedavillagevoices.webs.com. The intro you just heard was by Al Musitano. Good afternoon and welcome to Culture Coast. Today we are interviewing Joan Peters of the Joan Peters Gallery. Good afternoon, Joan. How are you?
Good afternoon, Donna. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for being on the show today. First question I get to with most of my artists. When did you start with art? How old were you?
I probably started in school. I lived in France at the time, and we had art in school.
So were you born in France?
Yes, I was born in Paris.
In Paris?
Yes.
How interesting. And yet you're over here. You had this beautiful city that everybody dreams of going to, and you came here.
Yes.
That's interesting. All right, so when did you come to the U.S.?
I came to the U.S. as an adult in 1975 because I had a job in New York with a French company that was getting established in the United States.
That is really interesting.
So they sent me originally for a year, and then they kept renewing my contract. And then after a few years, I found that I was more American than French, so eventually I stayed.
That's really cool.
Yes.
So your art, when you said in school, was elementary school, high school?
I guess in French it's called lycée, which is the school you go to from 10 to 18. I don't know what you should call it here.
That's secondary. It's not the primary school, it's the secondary school. Yeah. And so it was in high school, our idea of high school.
But I wouldn't say, I mean, it was interesting to me, but I wouldn't say it was my passion. And besides, my father wouldn't have wanted me to be an artist.
What did your father want you to be?
He wanted me to be a lawyer.
And did you become a lawyer?
Yes.
That is so interesting. So that was your job when you were sent over to here? You were working as a lawyer?
No, I have a French law degree, but in France you can use it more like an MBA, Masters of Business Administration. So I was just involved in business. I used to have my own business in France.
What was it?
It was a business manufacturing office supplies, mostly like folders to put computer reams. I don't know if you remember, but they were like all these holes on the top of the big, huge reams of computer paper.
Oh yeah, the old-fashioned dot matrix type.
Yes, exactly. So you had to file them and put them in folders.
Right, I remember doing that.
So that's what I was doing. I was manufacturing.
That was way better than my job. I was the one putting the stupid papers in
those
folders. The organizational part, far farther down the ladder.
So eventually someone came to me and asked if they could, he was one of my employees, he was a salesman, and he asked if he could buy the company. And I said yes, so I sold it to him, and then I was looking for a job, and then this company asked me if I was interested to come to United States for a temporary job, and I said yes.
And what was that doing?
It's one of the largest French companies in the food industry, and they're very big on cheese and jams, chocolates.
Very, very nice. Imported chocolates from France.
And cheese. I was more in the cheese division, yeah.
Well, they have some really good cheeses that they import from there, too.
So I was in New York City.
So do you go back to see your family?
Yes, I still go back. I was back a couple of months ago.
That's so cool. That is so neat. So when did you decide to get into the art?
Well, I got into the arts at a later date in the 1990s, so not that long ago. And originally, I visited a museum in Fort Lauderdale, which is called the Bonnet House.
Oh, yes, I've been there.
Okay. And the Bonnet House, if you remember the story, was owned by this couple. And they were from Chicago, and they were well-to-do, and he was a trained artist. And he was married to this lady who was also a well-to-do person, but she wasn't an artist. And at one time in his life, he became ill. So they used to travel a lot. They used to go to Europe, back and forth. And while he was ill, they couldn't travel. So she was a little bit bored, and she decided to take up art. And in the end, in my opinion, she was a much better artist than her husband, who had been a trained artist. And what she did was beautiful. Like, she started in her 40s or 50s, and her pieces were exhibited there. And I thought they were so beautiful. So it gave me inspiration that you didn't have to start when you were 20. You could still be a good artist and start at a much later date. And then a few months later, I lived in that area. I lived on the east coast of Florida at that time. And a few weeks later, a friend said she wanted to go to the Boca Raton Museum to go look at an exhibit. So I said, okay. And as we entered the museum, I saw a little sign that said Museum School. So I thought, well, that was interesting. So I got to catalog, and then I got home and I studied it, and I was very excited. And the next week I went and I signed up for a class, and that's how it started.
So what were you doing while you were in Fort Lauderdale? Were you working?
No, at that point I was semi-retired. Well, I was semi-retired. I was involved in real estate.
Okay.
And at the time I worked for a lady who was doing foreclosures. She was a specialist in foreclosures, because at that time,
there weren't a whole lot of them?
No, just like now, there was a lot.
Were there?
Yes.
Okay.
That was in the 1990s, probably after the savings and loans debacle.
Right, I think I remember.
Yeah, so there was a lot of foreclosures.
I was working for a construction company down in Miami, I think, at the time, and we hit a real big block.
So there were so many foreclosures. This lady, who was a top producer, needed help, and I volunteered to help, and that's what I was doing.
Okay, so that was part-time, so you had time to take some classes.
Yes.
And how did you feel?
Oh, I loved it. My first class was a watercolor class, and I really enjoyed the teacher, and she was sort of an inspiration also, because she was older than I was, and in winter she was teaching in Boca Raton, and in summer she would go to the mountains of North Carolina, and she would teach a class there. And I would dream and think of myself, when I would be older, maybe that I would do something like that. That was sort of an appealing lifestyle.
It is. So you've taken other courses besides the one at the Boca Raton Museum?
Yes, I kept taking a class every semester, and then I moved back to Massachusetts, where I had lived before coming to Florida, and then I continued taking classes and workshops, and in Massachusetts.
So you've been self-educating, going to
Yes.
all these different places
Yes.
to learn different techniques
Yes.
and different mediums. You
Yeah.
didn't stick with just painting.
Mostly painting, but watercolors and then oils and acrylic and pastel and printing and.
How much did you get into the printing? I didn't even realize what a field that was until I talked to someone from.
I love it, but it's hard to come by people who teach it. It's not taught as much, and it's hard to find printing presses. You don't want one on your own. It's very expensive, and then there's maintenance.
Yeah. And
some of the local areas no longer do it. Like, for example, when I first came to this area, the Manatee Art Center used to have printing classes, and they used to have prints. They got rid of them. And my last class was just a couple of years ago at the, or maybe 2-3 years ago at the Manatee Art Center, which had been taken over by the Ringling School of Art, and they had a printing class. Sadly, the person who was teaching was wonderful, moved away and moved back to New York City, so there's no press. I don't think there's a press there anymore.
So it's hard to find
it's very hard to
similar
find.
To a sculptor trying to find a kiln.
Yes.
Not everybody owns one, and they have to find places to fire it. So the printing press needs
you can
to be.
print by hand, but you never get the same.
No, it's
the same look.
Yeah, I just started learning about the printing with these interviews, so it's really interesting. I never realized that it was so artistic. I always just thought, it's just like newspapers or something like that.
Unfortunately, lots of people don't understand it, especially customers. And
not just those of us who aren't involved in the art world don't realize that printing is so much more than we think. We just think of it as a copy machine. Mm-hmm. That is what the general population sees it as.
In printing, you have many different processes. I was involved in what's called monoprint, where you put an image on a plate, and once you've gone through the press, or once you've put your paper on the image disappears. That's why it's called monoprint, because you can only do one. Usually it leaves a shadow on the plate, so you can use the shadow to maybe do something similar, but the original print is gone because the paper will absorb what you had put on your plate.
So they're one of a kinds, basically. Exactly. Each one is a one of a kind. And people don't understand that, the general population, which is why I'm doing these shows, so we learn about things like this. This is what's so fun about it. And so you mostly do two-dimensional wall art.
Mostly, yes. Not that I'm not interested in other
mediums,
yes, but
that's the one that calls you.
I mean, I can see now that each subcategory would take years and years and years to get proficient. I mean, I was doing watercolors for 10 or more years, and I could have continued on and become more and more proficient. Eventually, I wanted to try something different. So now I've been doing oils for the last maybe 10 years, but off and on. And there too, I mean, every day I learn. I still continue taking classes or workshops. I belong to a group called the Light Chasers, and we meet once a week and we go outdoors and paint.
I've seen some of them.
Yeah.
They also there's another name for them too.
Plein air painters?
Yes, the plein air.
Light Chasers is just the name of this group of plein air painters.
Okay, yeah, I've seen some of those.
And plein air comes from the French, which means outdoors.
I saw a group outside in the village painting, and I stopped and talked to them, and that's what they were doing. So it was interesting.
So we go every week, any place from Venice to Bradenton.
And all of you pick different spots in the same area.
Yes. But even if we're painting, the interesting part is even if you're painting the exact same view, they're all
different because everybody has their own style, and it's like a writer's voice. It's your style. Each one is a style. Yes. So sometimes you can even recognize who a painter is, like Thomas Kincaid or Norman Rockwell. They have their own styles. So your art generally you have studied the two-dimensional painting and drawing. So we discussed your water painting start and then oil paintings, and you also do acrylics, is that right?
Yes, I do.
Do you do a lot of your